Good morning and welcome back to Reading Wikis for You, where we read the wiki articles for you. And today we're continuing our look into the grim, dark future of the 41st millennium by looking at Angron, one of the original 20 Primarchs, and in this case of the World Eaters. So, as always, drop a comment down below while I'm reading. That way I can know what articles you'd like to hear about next. But that out of the way, let's get started. Angron, also known as the Red Angel, and originally as Angronius of Nuceria, Lord of the Red Sand, is the Primarch of the World Eaters. He was raised on the brutal world of Nuceria, fighting as a gladiator slave and having his aggression enhanced by surgical implants known as the Butcher's Nails. The only Primarch taken into service of the Emperor against his will, he fell to chaos during the Horus Heresy, afterwards becoming a demon prince of Khorne. Savage and in a state of constant rage, he was nonetheless renowned for his battle prowess and alongside Leman Russ and Vulcan was considered one of the most physically powerful Primarchs. The Chaos Emissary to Lorgar called him the Fighter. Biography. Slave of Nuceria. During the scattering, the boy that would become known as Angron was thrown to the civilized world of Nuceria, far from Terra. He plummeted into the icy mountains of that planet, and not long after a slaver found him in a scene of carnage. Surrounding the wounded young Primarch were the corpses of numerous Xenos. Imperial scholars would later theorize that they were Eldar, who had foreseen the great bloodshed that Angron would cause, and had tried, unsuccessfully, to stop him. After being enslaved and nursed back to health by the planet's ruling masters, known as High Riders, Angron was brought to the planet's capital, Deshia. Still a frightened young child, he was subsequently dumped into a pit consisting of a single ziggurat with hundreds of other slaves. Acid filled the pit, and to the cheers of the spectators, Angron was eventually forced to kill all around him in order to stand upon the ziggurat's uppermost platform and survive. Shedding a tear for the last time, Angron was proclaimed a promising newcomer to Deshia's arena combat, and given the name Angron Thalkar, which meant Child of the Mountain, and property of House Thalkar. After this, Angron became a famed gladiator known as the Unbeaten, becoming a fan favorite of Deshia and reaping many victories. The closest thing he had to a father during this time was the older gladiator Onomaus, but after the duo managed to slay two berserk Ogrins, his masters ordered the two to fight one another to the death. Angron refused, and the High Riders ordered that he undergo a psychosurgery known as the Butcher's Nails as punishment. Upon the nails being implanted, Angron was loosed upon Onomaus and killed him in a blind frenzy. When Angron regained his senses, the despair of this revelation caused him to unleash a bestial howl for days. The death of Onomaus proved to be the last straw for Angron, and he led a slave revolt among his fellow gladiators. Gathering a great army of slaves, they fled into the mountains of the planet where he lived for several years. The civilized cities sent armies to destroy Angron, but none were able to oust the Primarch and met the same demise. Nonetheless, the issue was never in doubt. His forces had little to eat in the barren mountains and were exhausted from the constant battling. His fate seemed sealed when 7 well-equipped armies surrounded Angron and his starving forces. In desperation, Angron fed his trusted comrades his own blood to keep them alive. Just as the battle was about to begin, the Emperor of Mankind's fleet arrived in orbit above the planet. The Emperor teleported directly to Angron's point of deployment with a few trusted Adeptus Custodes. The Emperor promised Angron a legion made in his image, limitless power, and lifetimes spent perfecting the art of conquest. But to his surprise, Angron refused. He chose instead to die amongst his comrades while fighting his oppressors. Reluctantly, the Emperor returned to his flagship above. Yet, just as the battle was about to begin, the Emperor teleported Angron against his will back up to the fleet. He could only watch in anguish as those he regarded as his brothers and comrades were quickly annihilated. In a rage, Angron killed one of the Custodes which surrounded him, but was forced into a state of submission by the Emperor's psychic might. Angron angrily asked why the Emperor did not intervene to save his comrades upon Nuceria's surface, but the Emperor dismissed the question as lacking vision. He was the Emperor and had his eyes set upon the galaxy, not a single tyrant battling a slave revolt. The Emperor expressed hope that Angron, in time, would learn to understand what he had done. Angron stated to the Emperor that he was meant to die upon Nuceria, and now but a ghost remained. The Emperor replied that a ghost would suffice for what he had planned for him. Great Crusade. Before Angron could reply, he was teleported to a nearby vessel of the 12th Legion, the Warhounds. Angron initially refused to have anything to do with his legion, and when several captains tried to talk to him, he brutally killed them, as they had been ordered by the Emperor to not raise a hand against Angron. The dead included the acting legion commander, Gear. Eventually, Captain Karn of the 8th Assault Company managed to form a rapport with his Gene Father, talking about the rituals of his gladiators and the traditions of the Warhounds. Now convinced of their worthiness, Angron took full control over his legion, which he renamed the World Eaters, saying they would form new traditions together. However, in the early days of Angron's leadership, he still refused to acknowledge most of his sons, who could not survive the implantation of the butcher's nails. At one point, Angron simply abandoned his legion, hijacking a frigate and disappearing. After 2 years of searching, Karn was able to track him down to a feral world, where Angron lived like a savage and revealed that he was simply seeking a foe that could put him out of his misery. Karn eventually convinced Angron to rejoin the Legion by reminding him that his Nucerian comrades would hate to see him in this state, and with the promise that he would try to lead the World Eaters to shed their weakness. Most infamously, Angron ordered that the World Eaters conquer their targeted worlds within 31 hours, a single Nucerian day, and the time he had scored his greatest victory upon a planet. The World Eaters consistently failed to capture worlds within this time limit, and each time Angron ordered decimation as punishment, forcing 1 of every 10 World Eaters to be killed by his other 9 brothers. After several of these episodes, Centurion Mago finally refused to again enact decimation after the Genna campaign. This caused Angron to be thrown into a rage frenzy, during which he murdered several nearby World Eaters until being subdued by his librarians. While Angron lay comatose and had his memories of Nuceria absorbed by the young Lexicanum Tethys, a crisis erupted across the Legion as Mago attempted to stop Galan Surlock from installing the perfected butcher's nails in all of the World Eaters. Mago's revolt came to its climax on Genna, where Karn slew the rebel centurion while Angron slew Tethys. Now, at the head of a legion wielding the nails, Angron reaped many victories during the Great Crusade, although some criticized the extreme and bloodthirsty tactics he used to ensure the destruction of his opponents. At some point following the rediscovery of Angron, Arkan Land was brought to a secret laboratory hidden in a dormant volcano in tundra location on Terra to aid in the Emperor's investigation of Angron's crude augmetics as the Primarch lay unconscious. Land had previous experience with the device taking over Angron's body, having seen it when investigating the Hexarchian vaults before he ordered them sealed due to the threat the items within presented to the machine cult. He told the Emperor that it was called the Cruciamen, but the versions he saw were more crude. The Emperor explained that the implants were not his doing and that he believed they led to Angron's instability. He also explained that they were created to remove the ability to enjoy anything but anger. When asked if the Emperor could remove it, he admitted he could, but the tendrils were deep in Angron's head and spine, and he was missing his limbic node and insular cortex. The butcher's nails therefore replaced part of Angron's brain, allowing him to live. The Night of the Wolf. The Emperor himself criticized Angron for the changes he made to his recruits. Like all other gladiators on his homeworld, Angron had received special nerve implants known as the butcher's nails, which tremendously heightened his aggression, but also had the side effect of uncontrollable rages outside of battle. Angron ordered his tech marines and apothecaries to duplicate the technology, and that all recruits undergo the process that would turn them into aggressive and fearless warriors. Despite the obvious advantages, the Emperor was displeased and ordered him to stop. Angron paid him no heed and continued the unsavory practice secretly. This led to the World Eaters being criticized for their general bloodlust and barbarity by their fellow legionnaires. They were known for blood rituals when not in combat and competed with each other for the number of enemy heads they could take in battle. Eventually, the Emperor dispatched the Space Wolves and Leman Russ to Malkoya to deal with Angron and demand an end to both the Butcher's Nail surgeries and massacres carried out by the World Eaters. A tense standoff between the Wolves and World Eaters resulted with all-out warfare, eventually breaking out in a brief but bloody battle. Angron engaged Russ in single combat, defeating Russ but allowing himself to become encircled by Russ's bodyguards in the process. Angron failed to understand that his bloodlust and disregard for both his life and his legionnaires had allowed him to become encircled. Disappointed that his brother had not learned this lesson, Russ ordered a retreat. Angron saw this as a victory, for while he would have fallen had Russ given the order to open fire, he had bested the wolf, and the World Eaters suffered fewer casualties than their enemies. Horus Heresy. After this debacle, the Emperor dispatched Horus to bring Angron back in line. a fatal error, as Horus was already corrupted by the forces of chaos. A master psychologist, he told Angron exactly what he wanted to hear, that the Emperor was a weakling, devoid of honor, and that there was a place for him in a new order, along with revenge against their brother Primarchs that had criticized his legion. Angron needed no further convincing, throwing his legion on Horus's side when the Horus heresy broke out. During the heresy, Angron would team up in the Shadow Crusade with Lorgar and his word-bearers to strike at Ultramar in conjunction with the traitor offensive at the Battle of Kolth. Angron, seeing Lorgar as a weakling, refused to cooperate with him, and frequently wasted time sacking and butchering strategically worthless targets. The tensions between the two Primarchs boiled over to a near battle, which was only interrupted by a Dark Eldar attempt to assassinate Angron himself. After the two Primarchs worked together against the Dark Eldar, they put their feud aside. However, Lorgar, recognizing Angron's instability and hidden sorrow over his forced departure from Nuceria, recommended that Angron return to his adopted homeworld to find a sense of closure, as well as possibly overcome the Butcher's Nails, which were slowly killing him. When the two Primarchs arrived, however, they discovered that the slave lords of Nuceria had massacred Angron's comrades and told the population that he had fled during their last stand. Infuriated, Angron ordered that the World Eaters and Word-Bearers purge Nuceria of its population. During the battle against Imperial forces, Angron saved Lorgar by stopping a Warhound Titan's foot with his bare hands before it could stomp on his brother. Later, the Ultramarines led by Guilliman arrived, determined to exact vengeance on the traitors for the Battle of Kolth. Angron went on to duel Guilliman himself during the battle, defeating the Primarch in a furious rage. But while Guilliman managed to escape thanks to an intervention by nearby Ultramarines, this was precisely what Lorgar had wanted, and the Word-Bearer's Primarch began a Khornate ritual. Using Angron's rage as a conduit, Lorgar channeled the power of Khorne and surged the Red Angel with the powers of chaos. Angron was transformed into a hulking, even more bloodthirsty avatar of violence and rage that had overcome the debilitating effects of the Butcher's Nails. For his new form, he was given a massive black rune sword forged by the Dark Mechanicum. The first words that the newly ascendant Angron spoke were of his desire for Karn to massacre slaves in the lower decks of the Conqueror and build him a skull throne. Angron and his World Eaters went on to mindlessly rampage throughout the galaxy, ignoring Horus's call to muster at Ulanor in preparation for the drive on Terra. Perturabo himself was eventually sent with orders to bring Angron to Ulanor at all costs. Upon the world of Deluge, the Iron Warriors arrived to find the population butchered and stacked into mountains of corpses. After withstanding an assault by crazed World Eaters and Khornate demons, the sky opened up and Angron himself entered the carnage. Perturabo and Angron engaged in a brutal battle, with the demon having the clear edge in power and speed. However, despite taking many wounds, Perturabo endured and goaded Angron, declaring that he was born a slave and now was a slave to darkness for all eternity. By using the Iron Warrior's Iron Circle and Volk to outmaneuver and bombard the World Eaters, Angron was bested as an Ultramarines fleet appeared in orbit over Deluge. Angron laughed and declared that they were all now going to die, but Perturabo reminded the Demon Primarch that he had seen his warriors butchered while he had done nothing once before. This moved Angron enough to act, and after creating a warp storm, the Iron Warriors and World Eaters fleets were able to escape the Ultramarines and move to Ulanor, where they accompanied Horus for the muster. Angron subsequently appeared in the climax of the Solar War, as a massive warp rift opened up over Luna, which allowed the primary traitor to strike force to assail Terra itself. Angron was seen perched aboard one of the battlements of the Conqueror. By the siege of Terra, Angron was a blood-crazed slave to Khorne. He demanded that Horus allow him to directly attack the Imperial Palace, regardless of the fact the Emperor's psychic barrier around the world would see him likely die in the process until such time where the traitors could weaken it. After hearing that Mortarian's Death Guard would instead be the first to assault Terra, Angron fell into a rage and massacred all he came across within the bowels of the Conqueror. Lotara Sarin feared that he would murder the tech priests attending to the vessel's reactor, risking a catastrophic meltdown. This forced Karn to confront Angron within the ship, where the Primarch revealed he knew of the 8th Captain's ultimate destiny and wished to supplant him as the chosen of Khorne. The two battled, with Karn being little match for his gene father. However, before Angron could finish him, Karn placed a teleport homer on the Primarch, which transported him to the shifting maze within the nearby Night Lord's flagship, Nightfall. Within, Angron became trapped and spent his time battling the many traps within the maze. Later, when the traitor rituals weakened the Emperor's psychic barrier on Terra, Angron was shot out of the Nightfall and into space, where he made his way to the surface. Angron appeared in front of Terra as a flaming meteor, landing and slaying friend and foe alike. He fought his way to the walls of the palace, where he saw Sanguinius and roared a challenge. Sanguinius refused, saluting his brother and stating that while they would battle one day, this was not that day. Angron raged, but due to the lingering effects of the Emperor's barrier, could not pursue him into the palace. During the battle for the Lion's Gate spaceport, Angron destroyed a Capital Imperialis and then a Leviathan, but was again unable to advance past the palace walls. When the Lion's Gate spaceport fell to a massive traitor assault and the Emperor's shields shrunk to only encompass the Sanctum Imperialis, Angron led a horde of World Eaters on to the Eternity Wall. Angron and Karn led an assault on the Eternity Wall spaceport, and in a moment of clarity, the Primarch regained some of his old noble visage. He gave an opportunity for the defenders of the spaceport to surrender, though they responded by blasting him to pieces with their gun batteries. Angron quickly regenerated, and along with his World Eaters, massacred the defenders of the Eternity Wall spaceport. He later struck down the lone Imperial Army trooper, Olanius Piers, as the mortal stood before him. In the prelude to the siege of the Eternity Gate, the barely sentient Angron was psychically guided by Horus to find and kill Sanguinius. At the feet of the Eternity Gate itself, Angron finally met Sanguinius in battle. Though weakened from his earlier fight with Kabanda, Sanguinius nonetheless next faced his demonic brother. After a climactic airborne battle, Angron impaled Sanguinius upon his black blade. However, Sanguinius used the opportunity to rip out Angron's butcher's nails, causing the demon Primarch's head to explode as Angron shouted for him to stop. With Angron banished into the warp, the World Eaters lost whatever sanity they had and began to cut down their own allies. This broke the traitor advance just short of the Eternity Gate. Eventually, Horus was slain by the Emperor, and the traitors were forced to flee terror and defeat. Already savage and brutal, the World Eaters quickly found a new master in the form of the blood god Khorne, eternally demanding sacrifice and skulls. Angron led his legion into their worship and oversaw his legion's retreat into the Eye of Terror. Post-heresy. Since the heresy, Angron has manifested many times into the Materium, usually at the head of a vast Khornate war host overseeing massive destruction. These incursions into reality appear impulsive and driven more by his desire to immerse himself in bloodshed and destruction than by his need to serve the will of Khorne. His manifestations often are inducted by Khornate cultists or other followers of the blood god through mass violence or rituals. All are heralded by bizarre phenomena such as waves of berserk madness or crimson rain. Angron now cares nothing about seizing ground or building empires, and he rarely communicates much to those that follow him in battle. Though some see this as a lack of intelligence, in truth, he still possesses a keen tactical mind underneath his fury. The Dominion of Fire. During the middle of the 38th millennium, Angron and 50,000 Khorne berserkers slaughtered their way through Imperial space for over 2 centuries. The incident became known as the Dominion of Fire. The wars and rebellions the forces of Khorne sparked ravaged over 70 sectors. In the end, it took 4 Space Marine chapters, 2 Titan legions, and more than 30 Imperial Guard regiments to retake what the Empyrean had lost. 90% of the area has since been recovered by the forces of mankind. The First War for Armageddon. In 444 M41, Angron invaded the Imperial hive world Armageddon. He led 4 World Eaters companies and a demonic host against the local defenders and their Space Wolves allies. Angron's forces ravaged the planet, but he was continually forced to slow his advance to erect monuments to Khorne in order to sustain his demonic form in the Materium. In the end, however, he was defeated when he was confronted by a force of 109 Grey Knights. Angron and his escort of 12 bloodthirsters, the Cruor Praetoria, initially decimated the Grey Knights sent before him, until a newer recruit, an extraordinarily powerful psyker, Hyperion, managed to first snap, then break the Black Blade at the height of the struggle. Now at a disadvantage, Angron was banished back to the warp by brother Captain Taramar Aurelian in a battle that only 13 Grey Knights survived. Return. After the formation of the Great Rift, the Salamanders prevented an attempt to summon Angron upon Armageddon. With the arrival of the Warp Calamity and with the First War of Armageddon now over 600 years in the past, the Grey Knights began to worry that the Red Angel's return was imminent. Angron finally re-emerged into the Materium on the bridge of his old flagship, the Conqueror, as it was leading a World Eater's fleet under Kosolax the Forsworn to assault the world of Kalkin's Tribune. Angron's first act was to massacre Kosalax's first 4 chief lieutenants, though the Chaos Lord himself managed to flee to avoid his Primarch's fury. The massive demon prince then led an army of world eaters and cornate demons to the surface of Kalkin's tribune, annihilating the billion-strong garrison and accompanying fleet of over 2,000 warships in a matter of weeks. With seemingly none of his former self left, Angron simply was a beast that lived within the bowels of the Conqueror until Kosalax moved it to a new world for him to murder. The Forsworn planned to use the Primarch to rally the whole of the World Eaters to his command. However, Angron often proved too difficult to control and was able to communicate with the possessed machine spirit of the Conqueror that had once been Lotara Sarin to move the ship towards an apparently obscure world in Imperium Nihilis, Malakbale. The Red Angel was being pulled towards the world by a psychic beacon not dissimilar to the Astronomicon. It was then that a 13-strong group of Grey Knights, led by epistolary Gracious Telomane, struck, setting up their own psychic beacon using a captured possessed Psyker on Hyades to draw the Red Angel away from Malakbale and into a trap. Angron and his vast horde plunged straight into Hyades, massacring all they came across, but not before the Grey Knights sacrificed themselves to enact a great psychic ritual using their stolen Psyker to set off a warp explosion that devoured the world along with much of Kosalax's army. Angron, however, emerged only wounded and retreated to the Conqueror to heal himself. He was then ambushed by the surviving Grey Knights, including Grossus, who piloted a Dread Knight. Angron defeated all of his foes, but was briefly overcome when Paladin Dvorak used his true name. The ritual blasted a hole in the hull of the Conqueror, which sucked out the remaining 2 Grey Knights. In deep space, Angron cut down Grossus, but howled in fury when the Grey Knight was able to send his soul deep into the warp and escape consumption by the demon. Angron and his great fleet were able to eventually arrive at Malakbale, beginning the great battle of Malak. During the engagement, Angron was seemingly fully lucid and issued strategic commands to his forces, dividing them into 3 great pinchers of a trident. At the climax of the battle, Angron was able to land on Malakbale and reach the coral engine itself. It was here he faced some 60 Grey Knights as well as Tempestus Scions under Brother Captain Dristan Crom, and while badly wounded, the Demon Prince and his 8 Bloodthirster honor guards proved nigh unstoppable and slaughtered all they came across. Angron was then used as a conduit by Khorne himself to destroy the coral engine, sending out a great psychic shockwave known as the Murder Curse, which corrupted nearly all of Indomitus' Crusade fleet Cortus. Later, during the same campaign, Angron was summoned by World Eaters allied to Vashtor upon Wormwood, amidst the Battle of Idolatros. Angron went on to maul the Blood Angels and defeat Dante, but before he could finish off the Chapter Master, he was confronted by the returned Lionel Johnson. During the subsequent titanic duel between the 2 Primarchs, Angron's rage was unmatched, but the Lion was able to penetrate his throat with his power sword Fealty. As he lay on the ground, the Lion beheaded Angron with the tip of the Emperor's shield, and the Demon Primarch was sent back to the warp. Season of Blood. Angron was eventually able to return to the site of his former banishment on the Armageddon in an event known as the Season of Blood. The arrival was heralded by the return of the Conqueror, whose twisted machine spirit suddenly set course for the already chaos-blighted world and gathered a massive Khornate armada. Angron was able to manifest through the Red Angel's gate shortly after the arrival of the Khornate forces upon Armageddon. Leading slaughter across the planet, he was first banished after Grey Knights under 5th Brotherhood Brother Captain Taros Hendron sacrificed themselves to trap him in a hexagrammic ward and detonated 6 vortex missile warheads. However, Angron was able to quickly return to Armageddon via the Red Angel's gate in the final stages of the battle, grievously wounding 5th Brotherhood Grand Master Rothweir Morvuns, who was fighting him with a Dread Knight. Ultimately, the badly wounded Morvuns was able to push Angron himself through the Red Angel's gate, just as it was sealed shut by the Grey Knights. Description and abilities. Karn, captain of the 8th Assault Company of the Warhounds, was struck by his Primarch's visage when he first saw it. Quote, wiry, copper-red hair curled away from a high brow, pale eyes set deep behind cheekbones that angled down like axe strokes to an aquiline nose and a broad, thin-lipped mouth. It was the face of a general to follow unto death, the face of a teacher at whose feet the wise would fight to sit, the face of a king made for the adoration of worlds, the face of a Primarch. And rage made it the face of a beast. Rage pulsed and distorted the features like a tumor breaking out from the skull beneath. It made the eyes into yellow, empty pits, debased the proud lines of brow and jaw, peeled the lips back from the teeth." Unquote. According to the custom of the gladiators he was raised among, Angron cut scars into his torso after each of his battles, in a continuing length known as the triumph rope. For every victory, the scar would be left to heal normally, while for every defeat, the warrior would work some dirt into the wound to cause the scar to turn black. Angron was the only gladiator in his world's history without any black scars. Corax believed that no other Primarch could have bested Angron in single combat save for Horus, and perhaps Sanguinius. Leman Russ was often considered his equal. Rogel Dorn, on the other hand, believed that he could defeat Angron easily, and feared him much less as an adversary than he did Horus. Before possessing the Butcher's Nails, Angron displayed an inherent psychic ability which allowed him not only feel, but also somehow absorb the pain and negative emotions of others. He used this to calm child slaves in the caves of Nuceria. Since his return at the dawn of M42, Angron can no longer be banished back to the warp for extended periods. Should he be defeated and banished from the Immaterium, he will always return 8 weeks, 8 days, and 8 hours later. Moreover, his return is heralded by calamities known as the Crimson Omens, which include the Blood Rain, Storm of Hate, and Fleshbrand Plague. These omens appear only upon sites that have experienced apocalyptic bloodshed, and it is likely that Angron uses the energies of these former battlefields to manifest once more. It is also thought that Angron gained this new ability thanks to the formation of the Great Rift. War gear. During the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, Angron wielded the twin chain axes Gorechild and Gorefather. Before these twin weapons, he wielded the primitive chain axe Widowmaker, which was broken in battle against Leman Russ during the Night of the Wolf. To replace it, Angron took up the massive axe Brazen Tooth, which was eventually given to the Word-Bearers as a sign of their alliance. For protection, Angron wore a massive suit of power armor designed from his Nucerian gladiatorial armor known as the Armor of Mars. Angron also wielded the plasma pistol Spite Furnace. Upon becoming a demon prince, Angron abandoned most of his mortal weaponry, taking up the demon weapon known as the Black Blade. Since his recent return to the Materium, Angron has taken up the demon weapon Somniarius and chain axe Spinegrinder. Quotes. Quote, "What would you know of struggle, perfect son, when you have fought against the mutilation of your mind? When have you had to do anything more than tally compliances and polish your armor? The people of your world named you Great One. The people of mine called me Slave. Which one of us landed on a paradise of civilization to be raised by a foster father, Roboot? Which one of us was given armies to lead after training in the halls of the Macragian High Riders? Which one of us inherited a strong, cultured kingdom, and which of us had to rise up against a kingdom with nothing but a horde of starving slaves? Which one of us was a child enslaved on a world of monsters, with his brain cut up by carving knives? Listen to your blue-clad wretches yelling of courage and honor, courage and honor, courage and honor. Do you even know the meaning of those words? Courage is fighting the kingdom which enslaves you, no matter that their armies outnumber yours by 10,000 to 1. You know nothing of courage. Honor is resisting a tyrant when all others suckle and grow fat on the hypocrisy he feeds him. You know nothing of honor." Unquote. Angron addressing Robout Guilliman during the Shadow Crusade. Trivia. Angron's name likely derives from the word angry. In a number of ways, Angron's early life and rebellion on Nuceria parallel the life of Spartacus, a gladiator who escaped slavery and led an uprising against the Roman Republic in the 1st century BC. Conflicting sources. In the original lore, as established in Index Astartes, Angron became a demon prince after the Horus Heresy. However, as of the novel Betrayer, he seems to reach this state during the heresy itself on Nuceria. All right, there is Angron, the Red Angel. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, as always, drop a comment down below. Let me know. Do you play World Eaters? Do you play, do you actually have the model for Angron? I don't yet, but I'm actually thinking about getting it. That's a separate issue, though. But, as always, leave a comment and let us know what articles you'd like to see next. So, with that said, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.